So yeah, that's great. Well, I thank you everybody for joining us today. I hope everybody can hear and see Radhika okay. Um, I just want to do a quick introduction to obviously this webinar. It's going to be called A Quick Guide to Referencing. It's going to be hosted by Radhika, who you can see on your screens now from the British University in Dubai. And obviously there's some more links to our Twitter page as well, and to our LinkedIn group should you want to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And so just a little bit of information about this webinar. I'm just putting a poll on the screens now. If you could fill that in, it's basically just to find out where you're joining us from today. So just to have a nice quick view and representation of everybody who's joining us today, and where you're from. But whilst that's up there and people are filling that in, I'm going to give a quick introduction to Radhika. She's a learning and teaching advisor at PUID, as I mentioned earlier, and she has experience of teaching in Malaysia and also in the UAE. At her university, she's responsible for developing curriculum and resources, providing sustained academic support to postgraduate students. Radhika is also actively involved in developing and improving university-wide policies and procedures on dealing with academic integrity and also academic honesty. One of her main interests as well lies in exploring how culture and previous educational experiences can impact student attitudes towards academic reading, writing, and plagiarism. So all very interesting, and as I'm sure as well, she's going to go into that with more detail in her session today. So without further ado, I'm going to pass on to Radhika, and she can take it away from there. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen, and I'm going to upload her slides first, and then we'll be able to take it from there. So yeah, Radhika, I'll just pass over to you, and if there's anything you want to add about yourself that I might have missed off, we can do that.
Okay, thank you, Christina. And sorry everyone again for the slight delay. I hope you all can hear me fine. If you can't, please just type into the chat box if you can't hear me. Welcome and thank you for joining us today for the fourth webinar. And as you can see, the topic is a quick referencing guide. What I hope to do today is to take you through some of the essential features that you'll need to develop a quick referencing guide, or what I feel are important features of a quick referencing guide. And later on, Christina should be showing you the tip sheet that comes along, which is on the plagiarismadvice.org website. And I hope to link what I've identified as essential features with what's on the tip sheet as well. Please feel free to type in questions in the chat box, and I'll be taking a pause midway to take some questions, and then of course at the end as well. Before I get going, I'm kind of interested to find out where people are and what they're doing, and why are they interested in this topic. So can we have the first poll up, please, Christina? Christina, can you hear me? Can everyone hear me? Okay, Christina can't seem to hear me, and I've just asked her to put up. Yes, here it comes. I think she's just going to open it up a little bit bigger, I hope. I just want to find out how many of you have actually developed a referencing guide, or you've helped develop a referencing guide, or you just want to learn how to do one, or you're just curious about one. So that'll be interesting. Okay, so based on what's already showing up, I can see that most of you, well, now half of you, 50% of you actually want to learn how to develop a referencing guide. So I think you're at the right place because I hope to take you through and show you some of the essential features. I won't tell you about the PUID guide yet. I'm going to leave that for later and tell you what happened with my guide. So let's move on. And So if you can see now, I hope to cover some of these aspects in today's webinar. So I'm going to start with the role, which I'm sort of slightly differentiating with purpose. So I'm going to look at the role of the guide in the university itself or in your institution or school. I'm going to look at the audience, and I'm sure all of you are thinking about students, but I'm also going to get you to look at other people who might be using or be interested in the guide. And then I'm also going to touch a little bit on the purpose of the guide and what it should do really, and what is it there for. My main crux or whack today will be on the features of the quick referencing guide. So I'm going to spend a lot of time actually telling you what I think should go in it. And of course, you're welcome to add on if anything else comes into your mind as well. And then we look briefly at how long we think a guide should be, and then also availability. How do you make it available throughout your institution? Okay, can we have the second poll, please, Christina? Yes, here it comes. Okay, so before I tell you what I think a quick referencing guide should do, can you please answer this poll and tell me what you think? And you can choose more than one answer here, so you can go for more than one. Okay, that's quite interesting. Now I can already see some of the answers coming through. Actually, everyone has chosen at least one of the answers. So yes, all of you, all whopping 19 of you, have chosen help students with citing and referencing. Yes, of course, and that's what our main purpose is. To help students with citing and referencing. Let's see what's coming next. Oh, that's very interesting. Help support staff with teaching, and I think that's very important because, I mean, of course, the staff in the academic support unit itself may be involved in developing such a guide, but of course, not everyone stays in the same institution for a long time. So someone may have developed a guide and then they may leave, and then someone else might come and take over their job. So it's kind of interesting that. That when people take over and then they can see what the guide is doing and what they need to do with the students as well. What I can see here is also I can see. Okay, very interesting as well. Reduces stress in consulting long guides. Yes, some of the guides that are given in other institutions can be 50, 60 pages long. So students would find that very, very daunting to, and they don't know where to start because they may just be looking for something specific. So it's quite good to have a shorter guide that they can look at. And what I find even more interesting is that, yes, it helps faculty when grading assignments because in a lot of institutions, there might actually be a particular percentage that's allocated for referencing academic writing skills or whatever. So then it actually helps faculty to be in touch with what's going on and what's been given to students so that they know that, whether the students are on the right path or not, what is it that they are following and what is it that they are expected to follow. Okay, let's move on now. Okay, to the next slide. Okay, okay, thank you. Right. So this is where I'm going to start with the role of referencing, and I think it was in last week's webinar, if I'm not wrong, if I'm not mistaken, that Dr. Mike Reddy talked about the mystery of assignments, and I think referencing is also a mystery, and it's a mystery to many students, and especially in this part of the world, in where I am in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates. Many of our students come from the Middle Eastern region. They come from other Arab countries. So and although I'm in a postgraduate university, and that many of them would have done an undergraduate degree, they still do not know what referencing means. And so there's a whole mystery attached to the word referencing. So it actually, by giving them a quick guide, it actually helps to reduce the mystery of referencing. They can look at it and say, this is what referencing means. And it gives them some sort of confidence that I can do this, and I know what this means, and I can do this. It would also help to make transparent university academic procedures. So if the university has decided that we are going to use a particular system, and this is how we want students to cite and reference, and it makes that transparent then. And you're not just telling students, okay, use any system as long as it's consistent. You're kind of giving them some expectations. You're also helping to set some regulations, because as I said earlier, if faculty are actually giving some sort of percentage for referencing and it's going to affect their overall grade, then it helps to set the regulation. This is a kind of regulation that faculty will be using to mark your assignment. And I think very importantly, you're protecting yourself and your staff as well, because as we know, and sadly, that if there are plagiarism cases, at least then students can't turn around and accuse the institution or accuse academics or staff by saying that oh, nothing was available. There was no guide available. I didn't know what I was supposed to be doing. I don't know what citing and referencing is. So it actually protects the institution and the staff by having a quick referencing guide, which you can tell students, this is it. This is available for you now. And by giving a quick referencing guide, you're actually sort of, I hope, paving the way towards helping students become more responsible and take responsibility for their learning and be more autonomous. That means they will have a shorter guide that they look at, and then they say, oh, okay, I want to find out more about this, so I want to know more about this. And within that guide, or that guide might give them some indication of where they can find that other information. So they kind of take this responsibility for themselves and say, this is a guide that I'm expected to use, and also what else can I do to enhance my skills and my knowledge in terms of citing and referencing. And of course, definitely, it ensures accountability, because if your institution needs to do some sort of accreditation process, it actually ensures accountability that the institution has some sort of guide available for students. If you can think of any other agenda or any other role for a guide, can you take a couple of seconds and type it into the chat box if you have any ideas that come into your head? Or if you want to make any comments about what I've got up there, would anyone like to make some comment and put it into the chat box?
I think we've got a couple of comments coming in here, Radhika, as
Okay,
well. So
great.
when they come up,
Yeah,
we can go ahead and answer.
Okay.
Yeah. Oh, you covered the
okay.
salient points, as Charles has said. Okay,
Thanks,
I'll let you
Charles.
continue.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Can we now have poll number 3, please? I would like you to do a third poll, please, if you don't mind. It's just... I'm just waiting for Christina. Yes, okay. So now I want you to kind of choose who do you think is the primary target audience. And again, this is multiple answers, so you can choose more than one. Okay, that's quite interesting. Of course, we are basically and primarily developing the guide for students, and that's very interesting that people have chosen faculty as well, that faculties will be consulting the same guide, and librarians, good. And of course, the third is coming up as academic support staff. Okay, I find it quite interesting that a few of you have also chosen managers and people who are actually managing the institution. I think it's quite interesting for them to know as well um, what's happening. So that's quite good. Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to move on. And so the audience that I feel is actually important is, of course, students. And all of you said 100% students. Students are our main primary target audience, and we are developing this guide for them. And as you said as well, secondly, faculty and academics. It's very important that because faculty and academics come from different fields and different subjects, so they may be used to something different, and they may also again be coming from different countries to work in a particular institution. So they may have a different background. For instance, someone in social sciences may be used to doing APA, and then someone else in another faculty may be using Harvard, and someone else might be using OSCOLA, which is very much a citing and referencing system for law. So when they come to a particular institution, it's important for them to know what is the referencing system used by that particular institution, and what are the citing and referencing techniques expected from students, so that they can actually be fair to their students. And I think it's also important for faculty and academics to know this, so that when they are giving any handouts or when they are giving a reading list to their students, that they are actually following the institution referencing guide and not whatever system works best for them. And I found this in institutions when I go and pick up module descriptors from different faculty. I can see that, oh, the institution may be using Harvard generally, but then faculty, because one is more comfortable with APA and one is more comfortable with MLA, are actually giving reading lists to students where they are using this particular system. And then it confuses students because they've got a reading list in the MLA style, and then they've got a quick referencing guide in the Harvard, telling them to use the Harvard style. So, they don't know what to do. They're going to get very confused because they're going to think, oh, this is what my lecturer gave me. Is this what he or she wants? So it's very important that the quick referencing guide is also targeted at faculty and the academics. And of course, librarians, because students, the library, of course, or the Learning Resource Center tends to be the hub where students tend to mingle and ask questions. So they may approach a librarian, so at least the librarian should have some familiarity with the system that's being used, and they can pick up the guide and give it to them, or they should be able to answer some simple questions. If any of your institutions have writing centers, and if you have students as peer tutors, then it's very important that those students who are acting as peer tutors also understand this guide, and that they are able to give a little bit of guidance to the students who are coming for help at the writing center. Definitely here in Dubai, we found that it's important to give this guide to also to our external examiners, because we have a lot of UK partner universities partnering up with the British University. So we found that it's important to also send our guide to our external examiners to show them, look, this is what our students are expected to do, so that they are kind of on the same plane with us. And also your partner university. So anyone else who's involved in accreditation, marking, assessing, you may invite someone to come and do a viva for a doctoral student, whatever, that they are familiar with it. The most important thing is that however small or big your institution is, that you maintain the consistency. The consistency needs to go across board. And as I said before, if you've got one faculty who likes and is comfortable with APA, and he's kind of using APA during his lectures and with all his materials, and someone else is doing something else, students are going to be pretty much confused. So it's very important to kind of establish that as much as possible, that everyone in the institution knows what system they are using. Okay. So now I'm coming to purpose. And Of course, a quick referencing guide is first of all an initial support for students. So when students first join an institution and then they hear the word citing and referencing, this is what they're going to hang on to. This is going to be their lifeline for the entire time that they are studying at any institution. So it's going to be an initial support. It needs to be brief and manageable, and we're going to talk about length later. Um, so so it's very important that it's brief and manageable, and that if there's a lot more information that a student wants, they also know where to go and get that. It needs to introduce some of the basics of referencing, which I'm going to give you examples of later. What are the basics of referencing? It needs to highlight some citation techniques, which are important as well, because you might get students who know a lot about citing and referencing, and at the same time you might have students who know nothing. So the thing is to assume, not assume too much, and give them those examples and models. And it needs to be a summary or a link to a larger guide. So this is the shorter guide, but students need to be made aware that this is just a summary. Not everything that you require will be here, and you do need to look at a larger guide, and it needs to encourage students to do that, to go to the larger guide or go to a handbook, or go to another university document, or something like that. And the thing is, it's very important that it remains, there should be a positive spin on it, that it's coming as a helping tool for the students, and it should not be something that's going to, make them scared, or frighten them away. Okay, I think we have the next poll coming up now, poll number 4. Yes, thank you so much, Christina. Okay. Can you just choose what do you think is the best to begin a quick referencing guide with? Okay, that's quite interesting that people are choosing. Again, this is multiple answers, so you can choose more than one thing if you feel that a couple of things can go on the first page. Okay, that's quite interesting. Okay, meaning of referencing and citation, excellent. Okay, I've got quite a lot of people who have chosen definition of plagiarism as well. Okay, okay. Right. I'm very relieved that so far no one has chosen penalties for plagiarism, because, as I said earlier, you need to put a positive spin on it. Okay. So some people have also chosen that there needs to be something about policy on academic honesty. Okay. But majority have taken meaning, and a lot of you have also taken definition and referencing style. Okay, that's great. Okay, thank you so much. Okay, this is what I think a quick referencing guide should start with. And the text in the gray clouds is what I would say you should not, or preferably not put as the starting of your quick referencing guide. Because as you can see, this is actually it's policy language. It's actually defining what plagiarism is, and this is actually defining what negligent plagiarism is. Now, preferably, you should not start your quick referencing guide with such discourse, because it's going to frighten students. It's going to put them off, because you're going to start with definitions of plagiarism. And really, if a student opens the guide and can't see, this is what they see first. First of all, they're going to start thinking about what does academic offense mean? What does imposition of a disciplinary penalty mean? What does recklessly or carelessly presenting another person's work mean? So they're going to zoom in on all those words and terminology that's there, and that's going to get them thinking in a different way. And that's hopefully what we do not want to do with students on a quick referencing guide. We want to start positive, and as most of you chose then, it should be the meaning of referencing and citation. So what I've given in the yellow clouds preferably what you should be doing and putting on your guide. So, something simple, acknowledging sources and telling them something about also, some information is considered as public domain. So, that you may not have to cite or reference. And also really starting to touch upon paraphrasing. Paraphrasing is really a contentious issue, and it's very, very challenging for students as well. So we need to, start with that. It needs to come somewhere in the first or a second guide as well. So it's very important to do that as well. So these are just examples of what I would say in the yellow clouds are good ways or recommended ways to actually start your quick referencing guide. Okay, what should come pretty quickly in your quick referencing guide? That means it needs to come somewhere at the bottom of your first page or your second page is what referencing style is your institution actually using or decided to use. So the problem is that there are so many referencing systems and styles out there. I'm sure you all are aware of that, and I've just got a few examples there. Harvard, APA, and Chicago, MLA, Oscola, which is a law referencing system. Now, some institutions would choose to use one referencing system. Like here at Buick, all the faculties are using Harvard except the Faculty of Construction Law. Because they come under law, they are using Oscola. All the other programs are using Harvard. Now, of course, my university is a very small university, so we can actually do that. But I know that in other institutions, each faculty can choose to have their own referencing system. And that's absolutely fine as long as you tell the students and you inform the students and you give them the proper guide for that system that you are using. So it's very important to actually choose a system and give them the guide. And I think this is important because if you look now on my slide, I am not so familiar with Chicago or MLA. I mean, when I've probably read stuff that has used Chicago or MLA. But APA is a proprietary system. That means there's one correct way of doing it. And the problem is that when students would like to, they'll go and Google it, they'll put APA, and then they'll get a million hits coming to them. And then they don't know where do I go. And right now, APA is in its 6th edition. So that's another thing. Like some of the journals are still using APA 5th edition. So if you are using APA, you need to tell your students which edition that you're using. You need to give them a shorter guide and tell them where all the rest of the information is. If you're using Harvard, now that's a non-proprietary system. That means there's no one correct way of using it, but that can also be problematic because students again would go and Google Harvard, and again they'd get a million hits from and websites, and then they would see that there are minor differences in punctuation and capitalization and use of italics and things like that. So they're going to get pretty confused. So I think it's very important to select your system and really give some guidelines about this is what we are sticking to, and really try to give them the help that they need through your quick referencing guide so that they don't have to run away and do Google, because we do live in a Google world and everyone loves to Google. So that's the first thing students are going to do. So before they run to Google, I think we need to set the system and make the decision ourselves about, okay, APA, which system? If it's Harvard, what kind of Harvard are we going to use and how are we going to set those? And it does become important. And what we need to make students aware too is that just because the institution is using a particular system, it doesn't mean everything that they read is using the same system. Because in your institution, they might be using Harvard, but then students are going to read a lot of books and a lot of journal articles or whatever, which may all be using different systems. The important thing is to tell them that please do not imitate the system being used in the sources that you are reading. Okay, please read, but then you need to come back to your system that's being used in your institution when you're actually writing and when you're citing and referencing in your writing. Okay, what I also recommend is that we have some sort of a flow chart in your quick referencing guide, because earlier in the poll, a lot of you chose that we should go for meaning of referencing and citing. And really, if you start writing about the meaning of referencing, citing, you'll be writing for 30, 40 pages you can really write, because the argument never ends and the definition never ends. So perhaps to kind of give a little snapshot of what actually citing and referencing mean is to kind of condense it into a flow chart. So this is a flow chart that we have in the Build guide, and I'll show it to you. So a flow chart like this, where getting students to, and it gets them to think about originality. Did you actually get up in the morning and think of this? No. Is it common knowledge? Yes, then do not cite it. But if it's not common knowledge, then you need to cite it. And that's the first stepping stone, if you like, into the concept of originality. And you will be amazed how a lot of students actually find this inspiring, because they will think, really? I need to cite it. So, and this as well. And slowly also, I think, really introducing them to the concept of attribution, and that it's actually, it's very scholarly to do that. It's a scholarly practice to be citing and referencing, not just saying, oh, because I've used because I've read and I'm using the book, I have to cite it. It's not just about that. Of course, there's legalities and there's things about not copying and not cheating, but I think it's to put a positive spin on it and say that, making it positive and say it's about attribution, and are you using someone else's words? Are you using someone else's ideas? And I think this kind of flow chart, and you can make your own if you like. I've actually given the citation of where these flow charts come from. You can make your own if you like, or you can go to this source and use Harris's flowcharts as well, which I think are very, very useful to get students to start thinking about originality and attribution. Okay, what else now? So you've got your meaning kind of in a flow chart, and now you're going to actually start giving them some models of the system that you're using. So you need to do in-text citation. If the citation has or they are having multiple citations, if they're using secondary sources, a source within a source, and that happens a lot, and students tend to struggle with that a bit, and also giving them a model of a reference list or a bibliography list. More models that would be helpful is examples of good and bad paraphrasing, how to actually set out quotations, short quotations and long quotations, and also showing them some example of good use of quotations and bad use of quotations, so they know what's expected of them and what to kind of avoid. And I'm going to touch on techniques of attribution. Okay. Okay, I just saw a message here, so I'm going to reduce my volume a bit, and I hope it's going to help Mary. Okay. All right, so this is now something like that. This kind of length would be useful for your quick referencing guide. So have take a short paragraph from some sort of source and put it into your quick referencing guide. Be very careful that you are not particularly using an example from a particular field, so that students don't feel that, oh, this is an excerpt from a book on IT or something, so I'm disadvantaged because I don't have an example for education. So try to go for something that's perhaps generic, and it's not particularly from an engineering source or a law source or whatever, so that other students don't feel disadvantaged. And then after the original, what you would actually show them is an example of bad paraphrasing. Now you can find examples like this all over the net, or you might be able to find it in some academic writing books, or you may come up with your own. You may have some previous student examples that perhaps you can use as well. So give them examples of bad paraphrasing, and this is very useful not just for the quick referencing guide, because as earlier some of you said in the poll that the quick referencing guide can be used to support teaching of referencing skills. Now you can actually use this bad paraphrasing in class if you are teaching academic writing or referencing skills or whatever, and really analyze this and get students to think about, compare it with the original and ask them, why do you think this is bad? And again, giving them a good example, and then again getting students to think about it. And again, if you're teaching, you can get students to think about why this is better than that and what's different about it. And then of course later on they can do more practice in your class if that's what your plan is. What you also need to include, as I said earlier, is a good use of quote. So give them a good example of quote, and you can see here that there needs to be some sort of introduction to the quote, followed by the quote, and then giving the example of the citation. And here I'm using a Harvard system, so the page needs to be given, and then having a comment about the quote as well, so that, because many students tend to feel that once they put a quote in and once they put exact words in, they speak for themselves. I don't have to say anything about it. That's it. They have said it, and I can move on. And they have to understand that part of why you're reinforcing why referencing is important is to get students to think about the sources that they are using. So if they need to critically comment, so putting a quote, it needs to be significant. It needs to play some sort of role in their paper. So, a good example of a quote. And of course here, not so good examples of quotes as well. So here you can see there's a sentence from the student, followed by a quote, and the quote itself is an opinion from McNeil, and then the student just puts a connector and then followed by another quote. So there's no critical comment or opinion from the student who's writing the assignment. So this will actually show students that, to avoid patchworking of sources, just taking quotes and putting them together and just building their assignment like that, or even paraphrasing and just saying, this person said this person said this, and this person said this. Yeah, so what? Okay, so we need to get them to think about straying away from patchworking. And a lot of students start like that, but then they need to build on it and hopefully get better. So these are some things that I feel need to go into a quick referencing guide as well. Secondary sources, as I said before, using source within a source. So a lot of students do this, and what they tend to do then is, I'm not sure whether they are dishonest, but they kind of present it in a way that although they did not read Blake and they may have read Haley, they may just kind of say, oh, Haley claims that or said this, and then put Haley as a primary source on their referencing list. So it's very important to get them to acknowledge the fact that, look, you did not actually read Blake. You read what Haley had to say about Blake. So you need to then come up and show why this is important, and why what Blake said is important and what Haley said about Blake is also important, maybe. So I think this is also important for a quick referencing guide. And then finally, what also needs to be included is an example or a model of a reference list. Now that really depends, because in some systems they call them a bibliography, in some systems they call them reference list, in some references. Some systems are not in alphabetical order, they follow a numbering system, whatever. So whatever system that you're using, what you need to do is give them a page or half a page where it's actually actually showing them a model of a reference list. So this is actually going to help them to build a complete reference. And what would be good is to give them a variety of examples. So giving them an example of an online source, and then a journal article, and then maybe a conference proceeding, a book, or a book which is a second or a third edition. You may also want to add like a chapter within a book, within an edited book or something like that, if students tend to be using a lot of that as well. So, or maybe books that do not have authors, like a dictionary or an encyclopedia. You may want to include that as well. So it's good to have a reference list as a model, with a variety of sources appearing there, so that students have an example to follow as well. Um, Now I'm coming to what I feel is important, which is techniques of attribution. Yeah. Okay. Before I move on, are there any questions so far that have come up, Christina?
Hi, Radhika. No, there's not been any questions that have come up. I don't think. I think a
Okay.
couple of people are still typing now. But
Okay.
if anything does come up, I'll let you know, so we can just have another pause and then we can take them from there.
All right. Okay.
Okay,
All right.
great. Thanks.
I'm just looking at the time. Yeah. Okay. But we started a bit late, so we're okay for time. Okay. Um, um, what I'm recommending is actually techniques of attribution is what I found is the way students cite. And what I've actually found that it might be important to also give students some techniques of attribution, which I show as author prominent and information prominent. So I think students need to think about, if I put the name of the author as part of a sentence, and what does that mean, and how do I set it out, and what does it actually mean in the way that I'm using the source, or what does it mean in the way that what's the message that I'm trying to convey. So I think it's important that we touch upon this as well. I'm not so sure about at undergraduate level, but I think this is quite important for postgraduate students. So this is author prominent, and then also giving them an example of information prominent. So you can see here that the citation is actually all coming at the end of the quotation or whatever. And funnily enough, I had students where I've read their work, and they just, and I asked them, okay, why did you put this like this, or why did you put this all in the bracket? And they haven't actually thought about it. For some of them have just done it as in alternately. The first one is author, the second one is information, third one is author, because they just want to give it variety, but they haven't actually thought about it. So I think it is important to kind of tell students that author prominent means that you will use author prominent usually when they are the important theorists, or they are the big names in your field that they've published a lot, and that's what's mostly appearing on your reading list, or they are the inventors of something, a product, a concept, anything. Or even if you need to give them author prominence, if that particular author is radically different from others. So if I go and read 10 sources and 9 sources say, oh, group work among students is very useful, and then there's one paper that says that no, group work actually doesn't work. Okay, so although I may not agree with that author, because they are radically different, I need to give them author prominence because they've got quite different findings from the general view. An information prominent would be usually used when you're combining information. So as I said earlier, when you have 9 authors who are agreeing that group work is fantastic, and then I would just kind of, put them all together, because then it really doesn't matter about who said it. It's what's been said is important, because a lot of people have said the same thing. Okay. So I think it's important to kind of show students that, to differentiate between how they are using their sources. And I think it starts to again reinforce why referencing is important, because you're actually helping students to make decisions. what is it I'm using and how am I using it? Am I quoting? Am I paraphrasing? Am I summarizing? And then now, oh, do I, put it as author prominent or do I put it as information prominent? Just as an added point, some books or sources may refer to this as direct or indirect referencing. So if you see an academic writing book that says direct referencing, it usually means author prominent, and indirect referencing usually means information prominent. Okay, I'm still on features. So what I would say is, so your guide then, towards the end of your quick referencing guide, what you should also be having is links, or some sort of pointers to where the bigger guide is. So if this is a summary of a bigger guide, you need to tell students where to find the bigger guide. Either it's on their learning management system, it's somewhere on a website, or it's a huge big hard copy in the library. You need to tell them where to find that. That's very important. And then also, um, you need to show them maybe some links to some relevant sites that may help them in citing and referencing. So if you have found some sites that's going to help students to, be critical readers and cite better and reference better and increase their reading skills and writing skills, then you can give them a list of few sites as well that might help them in their quick referencing guide. Many institutions are also using some kind of software or reference managers. These may be free, or the institution may have purchased something. So again, you can actually tell your students, okay, the institution is using EndNote, and how is it available, and how can you get some help to use EndNote, or you might recommend some free referencing managers like Mendeley or Bibliographics or whatever. So if your institution is in the practice of encouraging students to use software reference managers, then please give those links too. Before I move on to the last pointer, I think we can have poll number 5, please, for the participants.
Yep, sure, no problem. I'll just put that
Thank you.
across. Just
Okay,
before we,
here
we
we
do that,
go.
Radhika, I've just got two questions from two
Sure.
participants. The first question is from Andrew, and he's wanting to know what strategies do you use to change perceptions and to get students to see referencing as an essential element of academic communication.
One of the strategies that I use is that in my institution, they are all postgraduate students, but we've actually made referencing workshops mandatory. So one of the things that they do is when students come in, they actually do a little combined audit. I don't like to call it a test. I call it a skills audit. It's a combined reading and writing kind of test that kind of tests some of the academic literacy skills. And what I do is I don't grade that test. Well, I grade it, but I don't give them the grade. I send them quite extensive feedback on this audit, and then I welcome them to come for workshops. With that feedback, I send a schedule, and I kind of tell them referencing is mandatory and what's recommended for you as well. And that in the last 2 years really seems to have helped, that because when students come in, they've got entry requirements, and as far as they are concerned, they've fulfilled this entry requirements. So I don't need anything else. I'm smart and I can do this. Some students think like that. So you really need to reach out to them, not to show them their weaknesses, but to say that this audit is to help you and help us find out what are your weaknesses and strengths, and help us identify how we can help you. So I think if you do it that way, and I've actually found that making referencing workshops mandatory has really, really helped. Of course, my students are, of course, they're all adults, and some of them may not come for it, and we can't force them, but making them mandatory has actually helped. And in class, what we do is, I do not talk about plagiarism first, really focusing on referencing and citing and paraphrasing and quoting and critical reading. And it's a 5-hour workshop, and we only start touching on plagiarism towards the end of that workshop, because I don't want students to feel that they are there just because we don't want them to plagiarize. I would like to think that our students are want to be honest, and they are honest, and I want to engage that honesty and their critical skills in a positive way, so that they can demonstrate that in their writing. Any other questions? I hope
Great,
I've answered the question. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks very much for that, Radhika. I think that's it. We can continue with the poll, and I think everybody's already answered the questions as well in the
Okay,
poll.
that's great. Thank you. So I've actually asked you to give me some examples of links that you think may be useful in a quick referencing guide. So I can see here that, okay, a lot of you said, okay, internal student handbook and internal university policies. Yes, very good. I think, yes, support classes. I think that's very good. You actually need to show your students that there are support classes available, and how do you get to find out what are those classes? Where do you go? Where's the link to that? So that's very good. Any other university guides that are available as well? And any other support size. Free plagiarism checkers, that's really interesting. Okay, that's important as well. All right, okay, thank you so much for that. And I'm just going to come to this last point here, list of signal verbs and phrases. Before I tell you what are signal verbs and phrases, does anyone have an example of a signal verb that they would like to type into the chat box, please? Or a signal phrase? I'll just give a couple of seconds and see whether anyone has any examples. It's taking a bit of time. Yes, well done. So I've got Andrew who said according to, that's a signal phrase. Um, yes, great. So let's have a look. Um, So yeah, list, yes, argues, yes, great. I've got a list of signal verbs here that I think actually is very useful to put into your quick referencing guide, because you'll find that most of the students, they're always saying says or said, claims, mentioned. And what does that mean actually? Yes, thank you, Marie. You said states, yeah. And but we need to get students to now again think about their sources. So really reinforcing why referencing is important and thinking about their sources and how. So if you say, Kaufman believes or Kaufman affirms, that's actually helping the student to show their critical voice, because they are actually making an opinion or showing an opinion about what they think about what Kaufman has said. So actually encouraging students to use, thank you, I'm having a lot of signal verbs coming up here, suggests it's a great one, and a lot of signal verbs that students can use, and giving them a list and then telling them that there are more out there that they can perhaps use, and really getting them to think about using their sources, so that they're not just putting names in, but they're actually thinking about the significance of that source within their assignment as well. And here, thank you, I've got a great one here, reveals. And here, there's a list of signal phrases that you can show students to use as well. Interestingly, I've read in many academic journals that have touched on academic writing. If you can see the third one, if you say according to, that's actually a hedging expression to create distance between yourself and the source. So if you're using a source and you don't completely agree with that source, or you're a little bit doubtful about what that source is saying, then you can actually say according to. I didn't actually know that until I read some of this stuff about teaching academic writing, and I thought, wow, so many of us are using according to without really realizing what's the impact of according to. So, all right. So before I move on, then the last poll, can we have poll number 6, please? Yes. What do you think is the ideal length of a quick referencing guide? Wow. Okay. I've already got 100% saying 1 to 5 pages. Okay. All right then. Okay. Okay. And okay. Okay. All right. Let's just wait a minute. Okay. Some people are actually going for more than 20 pages. All right. Most are still sitting at 1 to 5 pages. And some people are sitting at 6 to 10 pages. Okay, all right. And people have changed their mind. Okay, all right. I'm not actually going to tell you how long your quick referencing guide is going to be, but I think anything between 1 to 5 pages might be a little bit short. I think because I don't think you can put all those features that I've recommended earlier between 1 to 5 pages. So you might want to go between 5 to 10 pages, I think. And I think that's fine because usually if you look at the longer guides, like recently I was just looking at um, a guide, Oscola guide, the real Oscola guide, which is the Oxford Standard Legal Citation System or whatever. That's actually a 54 or a 56-page guide. And of course, if you give students that, they're just going to run away screaming, you know. So, and then what universities have done, and I've seen who are using Oscola, is shortened it to a 8 to 10 page kind of a guide. And I think that's really good. The important thing is, yeah, make a decision of what is it that needs to go in. So some of the features that I've told you, and you may have other important features that you think should go in. And then look at your institutional requirements as well. There are other things that you may need to put in because of your institution. Just make sure that it's not text heavy. You're giving solid snapshot examples that students can immediately go and look at models. And of course, as I said earlier, the links should lead to more information. And please, as well, what we should not be doing is including policy terminology and language, as I showed you before, the gray clouds. You know, try not to define plagiarism and things like that, because that's going to be really off-putting for students. So I think a good length would be 5 to 10 pages long, but of course sometimes we can't help it and it can become longer as well. And in terms of availability, of course, it should be made available in the university library. Some of you may have student common areas or learning commons areas. If you have writing centers, they should be available there. If you're actually teaching referencing skill, this can be distributed in the classes or workshops. It will be great if academics also are distributing and giving this quick referencing guides together with their module guidelines or assessment guidelines that they usually give students in week 1 or week 2. It'll be great if they did that as well. And of course, it should be available on your website or on your learning management system, whether you're using Moodle or Blackboard. You know, it should be available there as well, so that students will know that they've got hard copies, there are soft copies, that it's wherever they turn, basically they should see some that the quick referencing guide is there, you know, and that's going back to the role of it, that, you know, it's an initial support for students, but you're also protecting institution and staff and making it completely transparent. So I think it's very important to have it available in all these places as well. I'm showing you this picture because you can see the man, you know, shouting up and down there, and I think he's got a big 54-page guide. And what we hope to do is bring a longer guide into a shorter guide. And now I'm really going to make an awful confession, and after doing this whole session, is that the guide in my university, which I developed, is 38 pages long. So, you know, thankfully this is a virtual meeting and you can't throw something at me, because I think the problem is when you are in a smaller institution and you got to think about who's actually developing this guide. And because I'm the only one offering learner support, and I developed a short guide, and then a lot of people wanted to check it. And then in a smaller institution, because people come interested in it and they want to check it, they start contributing and making suggestions of what else can go into it. So unfortunately, I'm now stuck with a 38-page guide. And so, but that's actually helped me to develop this webinar, because I actually opened my 38-page guide and thought, if I wanted to take out the most important things from this guide and maybe offer a 10-page guide, what is it that I would take out? And that's actually helped me to develop this webinar. So I hope the same thing doesn't happen to you. For those of you who answered the poll at the beginning that you're really interested in learning how to develop a referencing guide, so please try to stick to some of the features that I've suggested and try to keep it within 10 pages, and then kind of direct them to the longer guide as well. You know, so I think so. So I have to be slightly ashamed of myself, but you know, that's my next plan, that I should come up with a shorter guide. You know. And these were some of the sources that I used to help me think about what needs to go into my guide. And basically, not just these don't actually tell you what needs to go into your guide, but some of these articles actually get you to think about students and how they learn. And when you read these things, it'll actually help you to see that okay. This is what I need to include in my guide because this is important for student learning or student understanding. And also what's interesting about some of these sources are that you really think about the culture of students. And as I said, a lot of my students come from the Middle East, and really they need to be socialized and acculturated into what is attribution, and they haven't really got that concept at all, because a lot of students may come from systems where they've been encouraged to copy and encouraged to put authors on pedestals and say, oh, their words are better than yours, so use their words, and suddenly they are coming into a system, into a British system or an American system or another system that says, no, we're interested in your voice and your comments. And then they're thinking, I don't know how to do that. I only know how to regurgitate what someone else has said. So keeping that in mind as well when you're developing a quick referencing guide, that you might have students who come from pockets of systems where they have been inadvertently encouraged to copy, in a way for good reasons, but then it's going to be difficult for them to make that change when they are 18 or 20 or 30 or 40 or 50. It's going to be tough for them. So make sure that the quick referencing guide is coming out as a nice positive reach out for them as well. And so thank you very much. And I think Christina will show you the tip sheet now that's available on Plagiarism Advice. And I will take any questions now, or if anything that I missed during the chat as well.
No, I think that's it, Radhika, for questions. Also, as you can see, Radhika's provided her email address on the last page of the slide. So I'm sure if anyone wants to email you with any extra questions, is that all right? Would you be willing to respond to them
Yeah, I'll be willing to
that
respond to
way?
them as well.
So yeah.
Yes.
Great. Thanks so much, Radhika, for doing this webinar for us. And there's been quite a very a very large number of positive comments. Quite a lot of people have said it's been very useful and they're going to take a lot from it. So thanks very much for taking the time to do this for us. I know there's a couple of technical issues at the beginning, so I just want to apologize to everybody for that as well. Just so this is a link here on your screens that you'll be able to see now to the tip sheet associated with this webinar that Radhika has just given. It's actually going to be available on the plagiarismadvice.org website as well. And that you'll be able to look at and print out and download and do what you want with this one. And also just to say that next week's webinar will be entitled Using Electronic Sources Appropriately, and that's going to be hosted by Randa Al-Shudiak from the Holy Spirit University of Kastilek in Lebanon, and that's going to be at 2 o'clock British Standard Time. If you haven't signed up for that webinar, I encourage you to do so as well. As I mentioned also, the webinar will be recorded or has been recorded, and it will be put up on the website definitely by the end of the week at the latest, and you'll be able to access it then. I'll also be sending an email to everybody with links to the webinar and to the tip sheets, and also to Radhika's slide that she's made available for people as well. So yeah, just want to say thank you very much everybody for attending, and yes, hope to see you again next week. Thank you. Goodbye.